A United States Navy supply ship is dead in the water. In the dark, early hours of the morning in the Persian Gulf, a catastrophic explosion tore through the engine room of the USNS John Lenthall, a critical lifeline for the entire American Fifth Fleet. The Pentagon is calling it a maritime incident. But what if it wasn't? What if intercepted communications from Iran's most secretive naval bases are telling the real story? A story of a successful hunt. Has an Iranian ghost submarine just demonstrated a terrifying new capability to sever the U.S. Navy's logistical jugular, proving they can cripple America's warfighting capacity without ever touching a carrier? The official story is thin. At 0330 local time, the USNS John Lenthall, a Henry J. Kaiser-class replenishment oiler, reported a severe internal explosion while transiting a strategic corridor south of Keshma Island. Communications were briefly lost. When restored, the message was stark. The ship was crippled, without propulsion, adrift in hostile waters. A maritime incident. The phrase is designed to be sterile, to calm nerves, to prevent panic. But in the Persian Gulf, there are no accidents. Every event is a signal, a move in a deadly game of chess played with destroyers and drones. The John Lenthall is not just a ship. She is a 183-meter-long, 41,000-ton floating gas station. Her veins carry the lifeblood of naval power, millions of gallons of jet fuel and marine diesel. Without her, and ships like her, the F-18 Super Hornets of a carrier strike group are grounded. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers that form a fleet's protective shield become helpless, floating targets. She is the difference between projecting power and recalling a fleet in disgrace. And she is now a sitting duck. The Pentagon's narrative of an unfortunate accident began to fray just hours after the event. Intelligence agencies monitoring Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, or IRGCN, communications frequencies picked up a surge in chatter. Coded messages, rapidly decrypted, painted a very different picture. One phrase appeared repeatedly: Shikar Movafag, a successful hunt. It was a term usually reserved for IRGCN fast boat exercises, simulating swarm attacks on larger vessels. But this was different. The tone was not one of practice. It was triumphant. Then came the rehook, the detail that changed everything for analysts at the National Security Agency and Central Command. The chatter didn't just mention a successful hunt. A specific codename was used: Pearl Hunter. Why is that name so significant, and what does it reveal about Iran's true target? The name is a direct historical reference. In the 1980s, during the tanker war, the United States launched Operation Praying Mantis against Iran. A key part of that operation was the targeting of Iranian oil platforms. To the IRGCN, America was attacking its economic lifeline, its pearls. Pearl Hunter is not a random codename. It is strategic messaging. It signifies retribution. It is Iran signaling that it can now do to the United States what the United States did to them: attack the logistical underpinnings of its power. This wasn't an attack on a warship. It was a targeted assassination of a support vessel. A declaration that the untouchable supply lines of the U.S. Navy are now fair game, and the suspected weapon is a Phantom, the Ghadir-class midget submarine. This is not a billion-dollar Virginia-class hunter-killer. It is a 115-ton vessel, barely 29 meters long. It is a coastal submarine, designed specifically for the unique environment of the Persian Gulf. The Gulf is a sonar nightmare. It is shallow, warm, and acoustically cluttered, making it incredibly difficult for the advanced sonar systems of a U.S. destroyer to find a small, quiet, slow-moving target. The Ghadir is designed to exploit this. It can rest on the seafloor, powered down, effectively invisible. It can creep through shallow channels that larger nuclear submarines cannot access. It is the perfect ambush predator for this environment, a weapon of asymmetric warfare, built not to win a stand-up fight, but to bleed a superpower with 1,000 small cuts. For years, Western naval analysts have debated the true effectiveness of Iran's midget submarine fleet. Were they a genuine threat, or a mere nuisance? A paper tiger for propaganda purposes? The Pentagon's official assessment has leaned towards the latter, but the silence from the crippled USNS John Lenthall suggests that assessment may have been catastrophically wrong. While all eyes are on the disabled Lenthall, a far more chilling piece of intelligence has emerged. Satellite imagery from 24 hours before the attack shows unusual activity at Iran's Bandar Abbas naval base, the primary home of the IRGCN submarine fleet. 3 Ghadir-class submarines slipped their moorings under the cover of darkness. They did not head for their usual exercise areas. They went dark and vanished. The Lenthall was hit by one. Where are the other 2? This question is now causing cold dread to spread through the command centers of the 5th Fleet in Bahrain and back to the Pentagon. The attack on the Lenthall was not an isolated event. It was the opening move of a coordinated operation. The remaining 2 submarines are not returning to base. They are out there, in the world's most critical energy choke point, and their mission is unknown. This is a fundamental assault on the bedrock of American naval doctrine: uncontested logistics. For more than 75 years, since the end of the Second World War, the U.S. Navy has operated on the assumption that its supply chain is inviolable. Its oilers, ammunition ships, and cargo vessels have been able to operate with relative impunity, replenishing fleets to keep them on station indefinitely. That assumption was shattered in the engine room of the John Lenthall. Iran has signaled that it will not attempt to sink an aircraft carrier head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, it will starve the carrier. It will cut its fuel lines. It will make it impossible for the most powerful naval armada in the world to even stay and fight. A Nimitz-class aircraft carrier and its escorts consume a staggering amount of fuel. Without constant replenishment, their operational endurance is measured in days, not weeks. The IRGCN has calculated that it doesn't need to defeat a carrier strike group in battle. It just needs to deny it the ability to refuel 2 or 3 times. This single attack, this new paradigm, threatens to turn the entire Persian Gulf into a no-go zone for American forces. The Pentagon's silence is deafening, but sources inside the intelligence community are whispering about a specific piece of debris recovered by divers near the Lenthall's hull. It's not from a standard torpedo. The metallurgy suggests it's a new type of magnetically attached limpet mine, a shaped charge designed for maximum damage to unarmored hulls. A weapon delivered with precision by a submersible. This is the potential smoking gun, a weapon that requires the attacker to get dangerously close, to physically touch the target's hull. It is a mission of extreme risk, one that requires skill, stealth, and unwavering nerve. It confirms the attacker was not a long-range missile or a crude sea mine. It was a submarine. Up close and personal. This revelation forces an impossible choice upon the White House. Option 1. Formally accuse Iran and acknowledge the attack. This is an unambiguous act of war against a United States naval vessel. It would demand a swift and overwhelming military response to restore deterrence. But a response against what? A submarine that has already vanished into the acoustic chaos of the Gulf? A full-scale strike on Iran could ignite a regional war. Option 2. Maintain the maritime incident narrative. Downplay the event, repair the ship, and avoid an immediate escalation. This path avoids war today. But at what cost? It signals weakness. It tells Tehran that they can attack American assets with impunity, as long as they maintain a thin veil of deniability. It is a green light for the other 2 ghost submarines to choose their targets. This is the core of Iran's gray zone strategy: to operate just below the threshold of a conventional military response, an attack severe enough to achieve a strategic objective, paralyzing naval logistics, but ambiguous enough to make a full-scale retaliation seem disproportionate and risky. They have placed the burden of escalation squarely on Washington's shoulders. The search for the 2 missing Iranian subs is now a desperate race against time. But the latest intelligence from the Strait of Hormuz suggests the U.S. Navy is not hunting them. They are being hunted. They are being hunted. In the hours following the Lenthall incident, the U.S. Navy unleashed the full might of its anti-submarine warfare capabilities into the Persian Gulf. P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, the world's most advanced subhunters, began flying relentless patterns out of Qatar. MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, armed with dipping sonars and lightweight torpedoes, were deployed from every available destroyer and cruiser. The objective was simple: create an inescapable net of sensors. Find the Ghadirs before they could find another target. But what if the hunt itself is the trap? While the U.S. Fifth Fleet was fixated on the threat lurking below the waves, a new and deeply unsettling pattern of events began to unfold on the surface. It began with a single data link failure. A classified tactical communications buoy, one of dozens forming a secure network for the fleet, suddenly went silent. It was logged as a routine malfunction, but then, 90 minutes later, another buoy, 40 nautical miles to the east, also went dark. An hour after that, a third. This was not a malfunction. This was a systematic and coordinated attack on the Navy's eyes and ears. These buoys are the central nervous system of the fleet, relaying targeting data, threat warnings, and encrypted communications. Without them, ships are forced to rely on line-of-sight systems, making them partially blind and vulnerable to surprise. But who was carrying out this new attack? Surely not the submarines. A Ghadir-class submarine surfacing to physically destroy a buoy would be tactical suicide, instantly revealing its position to the swarm of hunters above. The answer points to a chilling conclusion. The submarine attack was not the main event. It was the bait. Iran had deployed a second, parallel force. While America's most advanced warships were busy chasing ghosts in the deep, a wolfpack of Iranian Revolutionary Guard fast attack craft was systematically severing the fleet's digital lifelines on the surface, operating with impunity in the chaos. This raises a terrifying new question. If the submarines were just a diversion, and blinding the fleet is the preparatory phase, what is the real attack they are setting up? What devastating blow does Iran plan to land against a technologically superior adversary that can no longer see it coming? The American fleet is still the most powerful in the world, but it is now fighting with a bag over its head, in a dark room full of enemies it can no longer track. The silence from the comms buoys is now even more deafening than the silence from the Pentagon, because inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Harry S. Truman, the screens didn't just go dark, they began to lie. This was not a simple jamming attack, flooding channels with noise. This was something far more insidious. It was a surgical injection of false reality directly into the veins of the American fleet's combat network. A digital poison. On the main tactical plot of the USS Bainbridge, the icon for its sister ship, the USS Farragut, sailing just 10 kilometers away, flickered. Then it changed. The blue friendly force icon morphed into a cluster of red hostile symbols, all screaming towards them at Mach 3. The system wasn't just blind. It was hallucinating. It was being fed a perfectly crafted nightmare, designed to trigger the one protocol no commander ever wants to use: automated self-defense. The Aegis combat system, the shield of the fleet, was being turned into a weapon against itself. What's worse than an enemy you can't see? An enemy you're told is your friend, or a friend your systems tell you is about to kill you. This is the new, terrifying frontier of naval warfare. This isn't about sinking a ship with a missile. This is about psychological obliteration. It's about forcing an American captain to make an unthinkable choice based on corrupted data: fire on his own men, or risk the annihilation of his ship and crew if the data is, by some impossible chance, real. Iran's true objective snaps into horrifying focus. They don't need to match the U.S. Navy missile for missile if they can force the U.S. Navy to shoot at itself. They have turned the greatest strength of the American fleet, its networked, data-driven integration, into its most catastrophic vulnerability. The Ghadir submarines weren't the main attack. The fast attack craft weren't the main attack. They were just the setup. The real weapon is a line of code, a ghost in the machine. On the bridge of the Bainbridge, the automated Aegis system elevates its threat warning. Its algorithms, devoid of human doubt, have concluded the attack is real and imminent. It issues its final, chilling recommendation: immediate engagement recommended. The launch sequence for their own SM-2 surface-to-air missiles begins to spool up, preparing to fire not at an Iranian missile, but at the USS Farragut. The captain has seconds to decide, a few heartbeats to choose between a potential court-martial for inaction or the unforgivable sin of fratricide. The Ghost submarines have created a phantom threat, but the finger on the trigger, the missile in the tube, is now terrifyingly real. And it is American. Manual override. Now. The captain's voice cuts through the synthetic blare of the alarms like a blade. He doesn't look at the screen anymore. His eyes are fixed out the armored glass of the bridge, staring into the physical darkness at the familiar silhouette of the Farragut. He's betting his career, and the lives of 2 crews, on a single human instinct: that the machine is wrong. On the tactical plot, the storm of red icons vanishes, as if it were never there, leaving only the single, steady blue icon of the friendly vessel. The illusion is broken. The ghost has been exorcised from the machine, but the psychological wound remains. The system wasn't just wrong, it was maliciously, brilliantly manipulated. But how to be sure? In this new battle space, seeing is no longer believing. The captain turns to an ancient solution. Get me a signalman on the bridge wing. Aldous lamp. Challenge and reply, old school. Now. A command from a bygone era, for a threat from the bleeding edge of tomorrow. Seconds later, a pinpoint of light answers back from the Farragut's silhouette, flashing the correct countersign. A simple, unhackable confirmation. They were still friends. They were still safe from each other, but they were not safe. The truth dawns on every commander across the strike group. who had been fighting their own phantom demons on their own corrupted screens. The Iranian attack had failed to draw American blood, but it had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They didn't need to sink a single destroyer. They simply had to prove that they could make the Americans sink themselves. They shattered the fleet's most critical component: trust. Trust in the network. Trust in the data. Trust in the machine. In the cold light of a Persian Gulf dawn, the USS Harry S. Truman and its escorts turn away. It is not a retreat from an enemy they can fight, but from a battlefield they no longer understand. The most powerful fleet ever assembled was forced to disengage, not by a missile or a torpedo, but by an idea, a line of code that held a mirror up to its own power and turned it into a weapon of self-destruction. This is the new front, a war fought not for territory, but for perception, a war of cognitive dominance, where the primary target is the mind of the commander. The Ghadir submarines and the IRGC speedboats were merely the opening moves in a chess match where the board itself is a lie. The real battlefield is now inside the circuit boards, the data links, and the very consciousness of the warfighter. The front line of the 21st century is no longer a line on a map. It is a flickering screen, a stream of weaponized data, and the terrifying space between what is real and what you are told is real. To understand this new era of conflict, you can't just look at the front. You have to break it down. That's what we do here. Subscribe to Breaking_the